So, welcome everyone to another seminar at the University of Toronto. Today, we are pleased to have Kanchan Maharaj from the city of Toronto. She will be presenting on the topic of equity in active transportation. Kanchan is the senior engineer in the City of Toronto's Cycling and Pedestrian Projects Unit in the Transportation Services Division. She is responsible for managing the unit's design staff and their delivery contracts. She has over 25 years of Canadian and international engineering, construction, policy, and planning experience in the public and private sector. And she has volunteered and worked with many equity-focused organizations in the GTA throughout her career. She has been with the city's cycling unit for more than 7 years. Welcome, Kanchan, and the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Usman. So as Usman already summarized, I'm going to be talking about equity in the planning, design, and implementation of active transportation infrastructure at the City of Toronto, with a focus on how we got, a history of how we got here, some of the challenges we've had in the past and the challenges we have now, as well as how we plan, design, and deliver our infrastructure and take care of what's out there. Overview of the topics and the sequence. I'm going to try and summarize all of this data and all of the information in. I'm going to go over our history of the cycling network plan, the first plan in 2016, and the recent update in 2021, the near-term prioritization framework that we are now using, and the cycling impact analysis and neighbor improvement areas that we use to help incorporate more equity data and information to inform our cycling network plan. Improvements to the equity index map, the public consultation design process that we go through. I'm going to present a case study of one of the neighborhoods where we, a neighborhood improvement area where we implemented a project and had to go back and make changes. And then talk about briefly at the end about some of the materials and construction processes that we use. So our first cycling network plan was in 2016. And it was a 10-year cycling network plan with 8 categories of analysis. Let's move this out of the way. In the orange here are all of the categories that we used in the first cycling network plan. Current typical trip generation type of data, connectivity, barrier crossings, network coverage, transit access, safety, and potential cycling and current and future cycling network demand. This network plan was based on a snapshot of a tool that the city uses called Toronto InView, which is part of our capital coordination office. And this tool is used to coordinate all of the different types of construction all around the city. At the time, most divisions participated in it. Now I think all but one major division participates in it, as well as third parties. So TTC, all the utilities also have all of their projects in there. But at the time in 2016, when we did this first snapshot, because of how rapidly everybody's programs were changing and that there wasn't high participation, by the time we published the map and the network plan, it was already out of date because everybody's programs were changing. In 2018, we came back and we redid it. And we realized that we need a short-term, like a near-term program and a longer-term program. A near-term to take advantage of the projects and opportunities that were more solid and more firmly planned and already programmed, as well as a longer-term plan and a citywide plan. And we didn't lock it into 10 years anymore. We just looked as far in the future as we had data. And we also added equity in 2018 to 2019 with the 2019 update. My next couple slides are going to talk about how we incorporated equity and the factors and outreach and data that we collected. Our most recent update was in December 2021, and that is our 2022 to 2024 plan. The goal of the cycling network plan has always been to connect, grow, and renew our cycling infrastructure. Historically, we had always taken advantage of road reconstructions or resurfacings and bundled with those types of projects. We didn't really deliver projects on our own. And what that resulted in is a lot of disconnected and small segments of cycling infrastructure wherever the opportunity historically presented itself. So our goal now is to try and connect all of those disjointed sections, as well as to grow what we have out there and renew and upgrade the older pieces of infrastructure to bring it up to current standards. Another goal of our cycling network plan is to try and meet the city policy objective in the city's official plan to bring all Toronto residents within 1 kilometer of a designated cycling route, as well as the TransformTO long-term goal that 75% of trips under 5 kilometers are walked or cycled by 2050. So the 2019 plan, the dark orange factors here are ones that we added more data in 2019 to do a further analysis, as well as we added the equity data and criteria. This slide shows our near-term plan. Something else that happened between 2016 and 2019 is that the Transportation Division went through a reorg. And we, the cycling group, had their planning responsibilities removed from our group and moved to the capital programming group. So one of the advantages of that is that cycling is no longer planned independently of transportation infrastructure. It's included by default as part of the larger program. And our group, the group that I'm in now, the Cycling Pedestrian Projects Unit, we are responsible for delivering the near-term plan after the capital programs unit plans the longer-term plan and determines what is possible near-term and what is possible in the long-term. And then they hand the near-term plan to us to do the consultation and the delivery of that near-term program. This slide just shows how that near-term program is determined. So the candidate routes are all compiled, and I'll talk about this a little later about how that data is compiled and what data goes into it. And we look at opportunities. So state of good repair program, road safety focus, planning area focuses. We look at the trip generators and all that type of data, the collision data, barrier crossings, network coverage data. And then how constructible and complex is this project? How likely are we be able to do it in the near term, and what opportunities do we have to build it? So whether it's a standalone project bundled with a road reconstruction and resurfacing, or whether it can be done quick build with our own materials and our own contracts, or it needs civil construction. And throughout the whole process, we try and apply an equity lens. So we look at the Neighbourhood Cycling and Equity Index, which I'll talk about later, the geographic distribution of our projects, and we do stakeholder engagement when we get to this consultation program step. So this is the final result of our analysis. I'll be going through the steps on how we get here on my next slides. We score every route. Every 2 to 3 years, we go through every route of the City of Toronto, and we apply a score to it through our network analysis. And in the 2019 update is when we added an equity lens to the score. I have a couple of slides to explain that coming up. The routes that are in the red are the ones that are the highest priorities. They're the ones that receive the highest scores. And those are the ones that move into our near term as soon as there's an opportunity to do so. So the city has designated neighborhood improvement areas. In March 2014, the City of Toronto identified 31 neighborhoods out of the 140 social planning neighborhoods that are designated as neighborhood improvement areas under the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy. There are 15 planning tables that cover these 31 neighborhoods, and each NIA is assigned a community development officer who will work collaboratively with residents and city staff to make sure city services and facilities address the neighborhood priorities. It also supports partnerships with other community agencies to deliver services. Each route that we analyze as part of our cycling network plan has an equity score, and that equity score is based on 5 key areas: the economic opportunities in the neighborhoods, income levels and quality of the job opportunities, the social development, things like education, literacy, access to social recreation and cultural services, Participation in decision-making, so voting in elections and working with neighborhoods to make plans and priorities. Healthy lives, like medical care and disabilities and illnesses that the residents in that neighborhood live with, and the physical surroundings in the neighborhood. So access to transportation, parks, green spaces, public meeting spaces, and air quality. When we did our 2019 update, we went to almost all of these neighborhoods, neighborhood planning tables of the 15 of them. And we took maps of their neighborhoods and we put them up on the walls and we asked for feedback on anything related to how people get around their neighborhood and where the important destinations are. And not just cycling. So that's a key thing to remember in this consultation that we did. We asked for everything. How people get around. Is it walking, transit, driving? Where do they go and how do they get there? And what barriers do people experience? Safety, lighting, accessibility, costs. Where do people want to go and where do they need to go, regardless of the mode? And all this data we collected, we still have all of this data, we still use all of this data, and it helps inform our public engagement and consultation process when projects are programmed and make it into the near-term plan for these different neighborhoods. We used all of this data to then create a heat map to show where the important destinations were and to input to inform the scoring process. When we scored all of our routes, if a route passes through or serves a neighborhood improvement area, when we did the scoring, it automatically got double the points. So if a route either passes through or serves an important destination that people in a neighborhood improvement area said that is important to them, we doubled the points. And the reason for that is to hopefully try to float those routes up to the top of our scoring and prioritize them in the delivery process as well. Then we took all of this heat map data and overlaid it with our cycling network plan data, as well as the neighborhood improvement area data, just to validate and to make sure that we were actually serving these neighborhoods more effectively. So this is the heat map that was generated. And so the neighborhoods that are darker on here are the ones that are underserved, both from a cycling perspective and from a social equity perspective. And it provides us another way at looking at the data to prioritize our work. And we learned a lot through this work. It helped us start to improve the way we program cycling, but we recognize that it's also critical that we continue to engage with residents and act on what they're sharing with us. And that's part of our public consultation process that we do during the year up to before the project is actually built. And most of the tools that we've been using, like the equity index and that type of data analysis, isn't specific to transportation. So there's a lot of room for improvement here, which is what our division has started to do and embark on most recently. And I'll talk about our budget a little bit later on how we're applying an equity lens to our budget as well. And transportation's overall goal is to try and prioritize designing and building integrated cycling infrastructure in neighborhoods with vulnerable populations. So people with low income, women, youth, racialized groups throughout the city of Toronto. And that I'll also talk about that later when I talk about our cycling budget. So the next slide shows our 2022 to 2024 near-term program. And the different color codes show the routes that are either underway, that are new, renew routes that are ones that are already out there that we're going to upgrade, and the ones that we're studying for future implementation. There's a few routes on here that were previously approved for implementation that will be programmed as soon as opportunities allow. So the renew is also, you might hear me say state of good repair, so that's also part of the renew program to upgrade things that are out there to bring it up to current standards. This overlays our near-term program on top of that heat map to help validate that we are actually building more infrastructure in the areas that are underserved, and to just see where the gaps are and see if there's any areas that we might have missed, and to help better inform the data that we are using to do this analysis. When you look at our most recent, our 2018 to 2020 program, we did an analysis to ensure that we are actually spending more money as a proportion in the neighborhood improvement areas as a percentage of the number of kilometers of roads in that area. So on the left, the center column here is the number of centerline kilometers in the neighborhood improvement areas, and the non-neighborhood improvement areas is on the right. So we are programming almost 14% of all of the roads in the neighborhood improvement areas compared to all of 6.4%, 6.34% of centerline kilometers of roads that are not in neighborhood improvement areas. This is the capital program prioritization tool that I touched on briefly before. And it's a transportation initiative to change the way that our projects in transportation are programmed and where our money is spent, and to refocus spending, to add an equity lens onto how the division spends money. And the 7 criteria on the left are the 7 different factors that are being integrated into this tool. And as I mentioned previously, our unit in 2019 was reorganized such that the planning of cycling infrastructure is now part of this programming. It is no longer just our responsibility, and it's no longer our responsibility at all to program long-term cycling. It's now part of the overall transportation programming and prioritization framework. The bottom right corner is some of the Vision Zero strategies. All right, are some of the Vision Zero strategies and prioritization that's also part of this, and I'll talk about some of this later and some of these factors that go into the Vision Zero criteria. The next few slides are about our consultation and design process and how we take some of this information to inform the consultation process and how we design our projects. Oh, there it is. Okay. So I touched briefly on, when you saw the map, you might have noticed that the neighborhood improvement areas are almost exclusively in a suburban area. And a lot of that is historically based on how Toronto was built and how the history of Toronto, the different boroughs, each had different governments and different priorities, different design standards, were built at different times in history, and are just vastly different. So in the suburbs, Scarborough, North Etobicoke, the roads and infrastructure is just built differently. There's wider crossing distances, greater distances between the crossings. A lot of destinations are mid-block that require access, and people cross the road mid-block at uncontrolled crossings. More vehicle lanes, wider lane widths, unprotected cycling infrastructure. Generally, it's all paint out there. There's no physical separation in the things that were historically built. Higher speed limits and speeding vehicles because the lanes are wider and it feels more comfortable to drive faster. The turning radii at the corners are bigger, so people can take the corners faster if they choose to do so. There's also channel challenges with the seniors and timing of signals and crossing distances. And a lot of this was just due to the historical factors and how the city was built and different priorities. It was very much a car-centric, historically, at least the people who are making decisions in the suburbs, was very much a car-centric culture. And it doesn't serve the current needs of the people living there now. So this one just shows some of the challenges. It's probably worse than this right now if you were to go there with the snow and the accumulation. But the center island crossing into the middle of the crosswalks, the really wide crossing distances, many lanes of traffic, the lanes are wide, probably no tactile on the corners here, and different things that just don't serve people who don't drive. This is a case study I'm going to cover about a project that we worked on in one of the neighborhood improvement areas, Flemington Thorncliffe, which is in the northeast corner of Toronto in the curve of the Don Valley Parkway. It is a neighborhood improvement area. We built the first project there in 2018, and we went back in 2021 to make changes. So we did our consultation and outreach in 2017 to 2018, at the same time that we were doing the new cycling network plan, the 2019 plan. And then we had to go back in 2021 to make changes based on the feedback that we received. So this is what we did for this project. We did several pop-ups. It's a high density neighborhood improvement area, a lot of high-rise buildings, immigrant populations, variety of languages, ages, and abilities. It's also a TTC route with high transit use. and lots of potential cycling connections outside and within this area. We had many consultations. We did pop-ups. We partnered with neighborhood groups. We also, I think we hired TCAT as well to do outreach in this neighborhood. And we created a lot of data. So we asked questions related to cycling safety, pedestrian safety, parking. When we went out there, we also do parking surveys before we do any impacts to parking. We make any impacts to parking, and we saw that there were a lot of off-street parking lots that were not used. So it seemed like at the time that we could remove a lot of parking because there was very underuse of off-street parking lots. They were vastly empty. And what our consultation showed that is 94% of the people supported the design that we took to them. And that design showed removal of a lot of on-street parking, painted bike lanes, and a center turning median that would allow people to wait in the center of the road to turn into many of the lots and the parking lots that were off the main road. By our typical standards up to this point, it was quite an extensive consultation that we did for this neighborhood. And we thought that we had touched as many of the factors that people thought were important in this neighborhood. So we built this paint separated cycling lane on Thorncliffe, as well as the neighborhoods in the area. But most of the impact was in the Thorncliffe area because that's where the high residential population is. And after we built it, we got some feedback because we always continue to collect data after we build something. And we collect traffic data as well as we get feedback, and we talk to counselors and residents. And what we found is that those parking lots were empty for a very good reason. Things like lighting, it was poor lighting. People didn't feel safe going into those parking lots at night, especially. They were expensive. Overnight street parking was free for the most part, while those lots cost money. People didn't feel safe. The lighting, the distances people had to travel in order to get to those parking lots as opposed to being able to park closer to their buildings. So we went back and we redesigned it. During that time, TTC also removed a bunch of stops because they no longer met their stop spacing guidelines. And that allowed us to add separation and to redesign this corridor to remove that center lane because we found it wasn't really being used and wasn't really effective. And cars were still traveling fast because that center lane in the middle allows for wider lanes. It feels wider and feels like you can go faster, as opposed to when you move the center, the two lanes close together, you've got cars traveling next to each other in opposite directions, which can slow down vehicles because you're closer to another moving object as opposed to having a wide center lane in the middle. And when you remove that center lane as well, it slows down traffic because the slowest car on the road or the slowest vehicle on the road now sets the pace when you only have one lane in each direction. And there is no place to go around. We also added the buffers. We added the parking spaces back on the road. And when we took that space from the center median and put it to the sides, we could add more parking as well as the buffers and curbs. And the TTC stop removal allowed us to add more parking there as well, and to add separation through where the bus stops no longer needed to go make it to the curb. In 2021, we went back and removed a bunch of lines and reconfigure it. So the bottom shows the new configuration with the curbs, painted buffers, no more center median, and adding parking spots, as many as we could. I think we added almost 20 parking spots where there weren't any previously. The next couple slides are about our delivery process. So I'm just going to skim over this stuff now. People can ask me more questions about this later. But something I touched on earlier was on the ways that we deliver projects and how complex or not complex things can be. Usually, historically, our best opportunity to make significant impact to a street is as part of a road reconstruction, because that's when we can move curbs. We can change the physical amount of space that we have to work with when the full road is being reconstructed. That doesn't happen very often. It's at least every 20 years, often longer. There's many roads in the city that haven't been reconstructed for more than 50 years. So we have to look at other opportunities to build things. When I talk about bundled here, that's when we bundle with the road resurfacing or reconstruction. Standalone projects are projects that are not tied to a road project. Or quick build, I put quick build on in quotes because that's quick implies easy, and it's part of my responsibilities is to deliver a lot of these quick build projects, and they're typically not easy or quick, but they appear so because you can be there one day and the next day there's a bike lane with curbs in, and they can happen very quickly when we get to the construction stage. It just takes more time in advance to make it happen. But it's also something that we don't need to bundle with the road reconstruction resurfacing. As long as nobody else is coming there in the near future, we can go in and do it ourselves. And then there's full civil reconstruction that is independent. Things like protected intersections or curb radii changes, or things associated when we do a traffic signal, where we can go in and change radii, add tactile markers, remove medians, or remove other sorts of things. That's more invasive civil construction that we can't do by ourselves. The other things we can do are the bollards and the curbs. We're slowly replacing the bollards that we have out there, the round bollards, with these flat ones. And these curbs that we have in our contracts now are custom curbs that we were the only ones using up until I think last year. Now other municipalities are using these, and these are special. The reason they're special is they are very narrow. They're only 20 centimeters wide, because in the city of Toronto, especially in a built-up environment, something as small as 10 centimeters can make the difference between something fitting and not fitting on the road. And typically parking curbs are 26 to 28 centimeters wide or wider. They also have all the rebar in the bottom, and that allows us to put bollards on top. I don't think I have a picture of the walls as well. And then these bollards are also spaced such that there's gaps for both for drainage as well as for moving the parking bins out. I think I have a picture of the walls as well. Oh, no, there's more curbs. I'll touch on the walls. I don't know if I have put a picture of the walls in here. No. So some of the materials that we use, I've talked about the paint, the concrete, the bollards. So those are for projects that we can deliver ourselves. And when we look at it at a project in the corridor and program it, we look at things like maintenance, sweeping, snow clearing, drainage. All of our cycle tracks are wide enough for a plow to fit down and wide enough to be swept, at least for the cycle tracks. And we also are responsible for coordinating traffic signal changes and bicycle signals as part of our projects and any corridors that need signal changes. We have a lot of stuff out there. These just shows some of the data that adds up to a total of 755 centerline kilometers as of January 2022 right now. We also have thousands of pieces of concrete. So all of that concrete, the curbs and the walls, were all added since 2019 when we first added them to our contracts to add more physical separation. This is a picture of the low walls that we have, and these are also custom. They were first used on the Lakeshore Boulevard cycle track, and since then we've made changes to them by adding the drainage in between, slightly changing the dimensions. But the reason we use these is because they allow drainage. They're also very narrow. So a Jersey barrier is 85 centimeters to wider. These are 45 centimeters wide, and we can put them in a lot of existing buffers. We can also make them like very long, and we're fully in. We can fully manage this from end to end because we have our own contracts to do that. We're not reliant on a road resurfacing or reconstruction to implement something like this. We also have the flexible bollards. We're replacing the round ones with the flat ones now. The flat ones are much more robust because they are actually secured into the roadway with a sleeve in the roadway and screwed into that sleeve, while the round ones were just kind of hammered into the road or screwed into the asphalt. And they don't last very long. There's also supply chain issues, which everybody's learned a lot about supply chain in the last year. The flat ones come from Quebec. The round ones come from Texas or somewhere in the States generally. And there have been months where we can't get the round bollards. The bicycle signals, we're typically doing between 15 and 20 intersection modifications of bicycle signal and timing changes and line marking changes at intersections a year right now. Last year, I think we did about 12 to 15. No, actually, we did 18 last year. And this year, we're doing between 15 and 20. One of the other challenges we've had are work zones. We've got constant struggles with work zones and trying to be consistent throughout the city in what we do and how things are managed. We have better guidelines now. These three pictures here show some failures, historical failures. This dismount sign is something that you should never see on the City of Toronto unless the road is fully closed. We would never direct cyclists to walk or ride on the sidewalk. And I know there's been inconsistencies even recently in how the signage is used. Sometimes when it goes up, the cyclists correct it for us. It should be a shared road sign, so somebody's painted that over. This bike lane closed. This is a contraflow bike lane, so this bike lane cannot be closed unless there's another route, because directing somebody to cross a yellow line and to head-on traffic is not the right thing to do. And it's there's only cars coming the other way. There's only bikes going in the away direction on this road. And legally in the City of Toronto, a cyclist is allowed to use any lane of traffic on a non-highway road. So the only way this would be up here is if the road was completely fully closed and nobody can get through. And we're working with the film office and the work zone offices to be more consistent on how the signage is used. All of the signage related to filming typically goes through me, or at least I'm copied on it and I can comment on it. But we have a unit in transportation that's responsible for the work zones. And our guidelines are being updated this year as well. So cycling and snow has been in the news a lot over the last couple of weeks. I'm just going to touch on this briefly now. You can ask me more questions about it later. But yes, the volume of snow was unprecedented in recent history. There were also other factors at play, but it really should not have taken this long. And many routes and cycle tracks are only starting to be cleared now. I'm not going to make any excuses for that. It is transportation that is responsible for that, but not our division. There's been over the last couple of years, we've tried to change the shift of how cycling is viewed in the City of Toronto, and that cycling infrastructure is transportation infrastructure, and that a cycling sign or pavement marking or separation is part of the roadway. It isn't special because it is for cyclists or for people cycling, and that we should not build anything that the city cannot maintain year round. And when we do our consultation, when we build things, we do consult with road ops, we consult with solid waste. When you might have seen video of garbage trucks driving over the bollards on Bloor Street, saying that that's what they were supposed to do. That's not what they're supposed to do. That's not what used to happen when cars were parked there. So there's been some miscommunications, and we're trying to be more consistent and make sure that all of that information gets out and is consistently applied throughout the city. And as well as to prioritize processes for cycling inspection and infrastructure inspection. There are now more cycling patrols just for cycling, and to improve our state of repair and maintenance. Because while Toronto is in the Northern Hemisphere and is in Canada, people do cycle year round. There's this bike share bot that you can go through and see the daily bike share usage in the City of Toronto. And even with the last 2 weeks, there's still been almost 54,000. This cap was taken today. 54,000 bike share rides in the City of Toronto in January so far. There's typically really only about 8 to 9 months of the year when, there are 8 to 9 months of the year where people can cycle comfortably year round. It might get cold, it might get rainy, but we don't typically get a lot of snow accumulation. And historically, like our cycling volumes don't go down that much in the winter months because the roads are generally clear except for what's happened most recently. Some of these examples are maintenance issues that we've had. Top right is Shaw and Davenport, just street sweeping and accumulation of debris in the bike lane. Bottom right is something that happened on Scarlet last year. And I think it recently happened on Lansdowne late last year as well, where the concrete, I don't know how this happened. Somebody hit this at speed. These weigh 1,500 pounds each. So somebody hit this at speed to dislodge those two. That definitely left a mark on whoever hit this. But it stayed like that for 2 days. The one on Lansdowne stayed like that for 3 days. This wouldn't happen if a piece of concrete was blocking a vehicle traffic lane, a motor vehicle traffic lane. And it stayed like this for so long because it was in a bike lane. So those are things that we need to work on and we need to do better. And we are hiring more inspection staff as well to improve our service levels for bicycle infrastructure inspection and maintenance. So that's all I have for you today. I'm happy to take questions or elaborate on anything that I've shared. And thank you for your time.